My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone to my ear. "Dad, I'm serious. Leave Grandma's house right now, please. Just go." It was 6:47 p.m. on a Saturday in October, and my 11-year-old son Brandon was calling me from my mother's place in Riverside, the same house where I was supposed to be celebrating my 50th birthday with family. Instead, I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a Home Depot 40 minutes away, my heart hammering against my ribs like something was trying to claw its way out of my chest. "Brandon, buddy, what's wrong? Is Grandma okay?" I heard the tremor in my own voice. "Is someone hurt?" "Just come get me, now. Please don't ask questions, just come." The line went dead. That was 3 hours ago. Now I'm going to tell you what led to that moment, because the thing about catastrophe is that it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It builds, it whispers, and if you're not paying attention, you miss all the warning signs until everything explodes in your face. My name is Michael Torres, and until that October Saturday, I thought I had built the kind of life that most people dream about. I grew up in a rough neighborhood in East LA. My father worked at a sheet metal factory. My mom cleaned houses for rich people in the hills. They sacrificed everything so my sister Carmen and I could get out. And I did. Somehow, despite the odds, I clawed my way to a decent career in commercial real estate. It took 15 years, a lot of sleepless nights, and more rejection than I can count, but by my late 40s, I'd built something solid. I had a 4-bedroom house in a good school district in Orange County. Not a mansion, but it was mine. I had a 401k that wasn't embarrassing. I'd managed to stay married to my wife Jennifer for 23 years, which in my friend group basically qualified me as some kind of relationship wizard. And I had Brandon, who was the light of my life. Smart kid, kind, still thought his old man hung the moon. Jennifer was a dental hygienist. We met in college, and honestly, I still got butterflies when she smiled at me. She was the organized one, the planner. I was the dreamer. We balanced each other out. We had annual vacations, nothing crazy, usually a beach house rental in San Diego, or a trip to visit my parents in California. We went to Brandon's soccer games. We had dinner together most nights. We were the kind of family that looked good in Christmas card photos. My mother, Linda, lived alone in Riverside in the house my parents had bought in 1989. My father, Roberto, had passed away 8 years earlier from a stroke. It was sudden and brutal, and my mom had never really recovered from it. She was 73, still sharp as a tack, but lonely. We tried to see her once a month or so. Brandon loved going to Grandma's. She spoiled him rotten, let him stay up late, made his favorite chilaquiles for breakfast. The Saturday in question was supposed to be perfect. Jennifer had planned this whole thing. My birthday was actually on Wednesday, but she'd organized a family dinner at my mother's house on Saturday instead. My sister Carmen was driving down from LA with her husband David and their 2 kids. My mom had been looking forward to it for weeks. She talked about making my favorite carne asada, had already bought the ingredients. That morning, everything was normal. Boring, even. Jennifer reminded me 3 times to pick up the wine we'd promised to bring. Brandon was excited about seeing his cousins. I was actually looking forward to it. Not just the party, but the sense of family, the continuity of it all, the proof that I'd built something real. I got to my mom's place around 4 o'clock. The house smells the same as it did when I was a kid, like old wood and the ghost of 1,000 home-cooked meals. My mom answered the door in her favorite blue apron, and she pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. I remember thinking she seemed more emotional than normal, but I chalked it up to missing my dad. October was rough for her. His birthday was coming up. "Mi amor," she said, kissing my cheek. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Ma, just work stuff." Carmen and her family arrived around 5. The kids, my nephews Miguel and Tony, went straight to the backyard with Brandon. Jennifer was in the kitchen helping my mom with the food. David was on the couch watching football. Everything was exactly as it should be. I remember standing in my mother's kitchen around 6 o'clock, watching Jennifer laugh at something my mom had said. My wife had her head thrown back, and her hair caught the light coming through the window, and I thought, and I'm not being poetic here, this is the actual thought I had, I'm a lucky guy, I did this right. At 6:45, I stepped outside to take a work call. A client was having issues with a property inspection, and I needed to give him some guidance. I was standing by the side of the house, phone to my ear, when I heard Brandon calling me from inside. "Dad, Dad, can you come here?" I told my client I'd call him back and went inside. Brandon was standing in the hallway near my mom's bedroom, and his face looked strange. Not quite scared, but something close to it. He jerked his head, a gesture that said, "Come here, privately." I followed him into the guest room and closed the door. "What's up, buddy?" Brandon looked at the closed door, then back at me. His voice came out quiet. "Daddo, I need you to listen to me really carefully, and I need you to not tell Grandma I told you this, okay? Or Mom." My stomach dropped. "Brandon, you're scaring me. What happened?" He took a breath. "When I was in Grandma's room looking for my phone charger, I found something. Under her mattress." "Okay." "There's like a whole notebook and pictures. And Dad," he swallowed hard, "I think Grandma is in trouble. And I think you need to know about it." That's when I heard Jennifer calling from the kitchen. "Michael, come help with the drinks." But Brandon grabbed my arm. "Dad, please, I'm serious. Look at it. But not here, not where anyone can see. Just promise me you'll look at it." I promised him I would. I told him everything was okay. I told him not to worry. I was lying through my teeth, and somehow he knew it. 20 minutes later, we were all sitting around my mother's dining room table. The carne asada was perfect. My mom had made my favorite flan for dessert. Everyone was laughing and talking. My nephews were making jokes. Jennifer had her hand on my arm. It was the picture of a happy family dinner. But underneath the table, my leg was bouncing up and down like a jackhammer, and all I could think about was that notebook under my mother's mattress. Halfway through dessert, Brandon excused himself to use the bathroom. 5 minutes later, he texted me, "Can we go soon?" I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. When he came back to the table, his eyes met mine for just a second. And in that second, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My 11-year-old son was scared. Not kid scared, adult scared. The kind of scared you get when you know something terrible and you can't unknow it. My mother was telling a story about my father, laughing and crying at the same time. Everyone was listening, smiling sadly. It was such a normal moment, such a perfectly normal, beautiful moment. And I was sitting there, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to fall into something I couldn't come back from. That's when Brandon looked at me again and mouthed 2 words, "Please, Dad." I got up from the table without a word. Jennifer shot me a questioning look, but I just muttered something about needing air and stepped outside. My hands were already shaking. The backyard was dark. A string of lights my mother had hung years ago cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. I stood by the fence, my phone in my hand, and texted Brandon, "Stay calm. I'm taking you home in 5 minutes. Tell your mom you're tired." His response came immediately. "Thank you." I went back inside and told Jennifer that Brandon had a headache and wanted to go home early. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she didn't push it. She was too well-mannered to make a scene at my birthday party. That's the thing about being married to someone for 23 years. You become fluent in each other's lies. "I'll take him," I said. "You stay, enjoy. I'll be back in an hour." "Michael, what's going on?" "Nothing, just a kid thing. He gets these migraines sometimes." It was a horrible lie. Brandon had never had a migraine in his life, but Jennifer was already turning back to her sister-in-law, and my mother was offering to pack up leftover carne asada, and nobody was really paying attention to the fact that my whole world was about to crack open. I found Brandon in the hallway, already with his shoes on. He looked small. When did my kids start looking so small? "Let's go," I said. The drive home took 40 minutes. Brandon stared out the window the entire time. I tried to make conversation twice, and both times he just shook his head. The radio played some pop song I didn't recognize. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. When we got home, I sent Jennifer a text. "Bee's sleeping, staying at home with him. Don't rush back." Then I locked the front door, closed all the blinds, and sat down at the kitchen table across from my son. "Show me," I said. Brandon's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry. Instead, he went upstairs to his room and came back down with his backpack. From the bottom, he pulled out a small leather notebook, the kind you'd use for journaling. It was worn, the edges bent, like it had been handled a lot. "I didn't steal it," he said quickly. "I was looking for my charger and it was just under her mattress. I only looked because I thought something was wrong. You know how Grandma gets. I wanted to make sure she was okay." I opened the notebook. The first page was dated March 15th of this year, 7 months ago. The handwriting was my mother's, neat and precise, the same handwriting she used to label containers in her freezer. "March 15th, I read aloud. "They came to the house today, 2 of them. They said if I didn't pay by the end of the month, they'd come back." I looked up at Brandon. His face was pale. I kept reading. "April 2nd. I sold the silver, Roberto's silver, the set he loved. I'm sorry, mi amor. I'm sorry." "April 18th. Called Carmen. She doesn't understand. She thinks I'm being foolish. She doesn't know the whole story." "May 3rd. The second notice, $47,000. How am I supposed to have $47,000? I've been trying to figure it out. Maybe I could refinance the house, but the bank will ask questions." My stomach was turning. "May 20th. Michael called today. He sounded happy. He was telling me about a property deal. I couldn't tell him. How could I tell him? He has his own family. He's already done so much for me. I can't be a burden." June 1st. They're getting impatient. The man with the scar came back. He said next time they won't ask so nicely. He said they know where my grandchildren go to school. I stopped reading. My vision went blurry. "Dad?" Brandon's voice was tiny. "Dad, are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I was very far from okay. I flipped back to the beginning of the notebook, trying to piece together what I was reading. The entries went back 9 months. 9 months of my mother being threatened. 9 months of her being scared. 9 months of her handling it completely alone. "There's more," Brandon said quietly. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were photographs. Printed photographs, the kind old people print at CVS. There was my mother, standing outside a building I didn't recognize, with a man whose face was partially obscured. Another photo of a car parked in front of her house. Another of her walking into a bank. "I found these in her nightstand," Brandon whispered. "Dad, I think someone's been following her." I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. I walked to the sink and gripped the edge, my whole body shaking. Through the window above the sink, I could see our driveway, our normal suburban driveway, and it seemed suddenly like a stage set for a life that wasn't real anymore. "How much do you know?" I asked Brandon without turning around. I read some of the notebook, not all of it. I got scared and stopped. I turned back to look at my son. He was 11 years old. He was sitting in my kitchen, in the house I'd worked 15 years to buy, and he'd uncovered something that my 49-year-old mother had been hiding from me for 9 months. "You did the right thing," I told him. "You did exactly the right thing." But what I was thinking was, my mother is in debt. Deep debt. To people who follow her, to people who threaten her grandchildren. And for the first time in my life, I understood that being a good father, having a good job, having a stable marriage, none of it meant anything if you couldn't protect the people you loved. I looked down at the notebook in my hands, at my mother's careful handwriting documenting her own terror, and I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "When are you coming back? Your mom wants to know if you're okay." She seemed worried. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat back down across from Brandon and opened the notebook to the most recent entry. It was dated yesterday, Friday, the day before my birthday party. "October 18th, I read silently. "They called today. They said the final notice is Monday. They said if I don't have the money by Monday, they're coming for the house. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm so tired. I'm so scared, and I can't tell Michael. He has enough. He has so much more than I ever had, and I won't take that from him. I won't. Even if it kills me, I won't. I closed the notebook and looked at my son. Brandon, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I need you to not tell anyone about this. Not your mom, not grandma, not anyone. Can you do that? He nodded, but his eyes were red now, tears streaming down his face. This isn't your burden, I said. You did the right thing by telling me, and now I'm going to handle it. But you need to let me handle it alone, okay? He nodded again, but neither of us believed that it was okay. Neither of us believed that anything was going to be okay again. I spent the next 3 hours going through every entry in that notebook. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. My mother was in debt to loan sharks, actual loan sharks, to the tune of $47,000. Money she'd borrowed to cover gambling debts that had started small and spiraled into something monstrous. Apparently, she'd started playing slot machines at a casino in San Bernardino about a year ago, just to get out of the house, just for something to do, just to feel alive again after my father died. And then she'd lost everything. The notebook documented her descent with brutal honesty, how she'd borrowed from one place to cover losses at another, how the interest rates had compounded, how the debt had metastasized from a problem into a crisis, into an existential threat, and how, about 3 months ago, the debt had been purchased by people who didn't use lawyers or credit agencies, people who used threats, people who came to your house, people who knew where your grandchildren went to school. I sat in my dark kitchen at 2 a.m, my mother's terror in a leather notebook in front of me, and I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to fix this. I didn't know how, but I was going to fix it. And I was going to do it without telling anyone, not Jennifer, not Carmen, not even my mother, until it was done. Because if there was one thing I understood, it was that some problems don't get better by telling the people you love about them. Some problems get worse. My phone lit up with another text from Jennifer. Coming home soon? I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my banking app and looked at my savings account. $73,000. Everything I'd managed to build, sitting right there in digits on a screen. It wasn't enough to cover the debt and keep my family from knowing something was wrong, but it was a start. I picked up my phone and called my business partner, Marcus. He answered on the 4th ring, groggy and annoyed. It's 2 a.m, Mike. I need a loan, I said, a big one, and I need it to be off the books. There was a silence on the other end of the line. What the hell are you talking about? Tomorrow. Can we meet tomorrow? Michael, what's going on? Just, yes or no, can we meet? He sighed. Yeah, okay. My office, 10 a.m. I hung up and sat in the dark, my mother's notebook in front of me, and I understood that I had just stepped across a line. Everything after this moment would be different. Everything after this moment would be a lie. The next 72 hours were a blur of phone calls, late-night meetings, and lies so elaborate I had to keep notes to remember what I'd told whom. Marcus came through with 40 grand on Saturday morning. A personal loan, no paperwork, no questions asked. 20 years of partnership bought me at least that much discretion. By Sunday, I'd liquidated $30,000 from my 401k. The tax penalty would hit me hard, but I didn't care. I was past caring about anything except stopping the bleeding. I told Jennifer I was dealing with a major property issue. Partially true. I told my mother I was busy with work all weekend. I didn't answer Carmen's calls. I kept Brandon home from school Monday under the guise of a doctor's appointment, then sat him down at the kitchen table and made him swear on his life he would not speak about any of this until I told him it was okay. "What are you going to do?" he asked, his voice small. "I'm going to fix it," I said. "That's what dads do." By Monday evening, I had $70,000 in cash in a duffel bag on my kitchen counter. It wasn't the full $47,000. I'd learned that the debt had grown with interest and daily penalties. The new total was $53,000. $53,000 for a woman who'd lost her husband, fallen into a trap, and was too proud to tell her son. The notebook had 2 names in it. 2 names written in my mother's handwriting, the only concrete detail she documented about who was bleeding her dry. Vincent Morales, and someone called the Ukrainian. I took those names and fed them into a private investigator I knew from the real estate world. Cost me another $5,000 up front, but by Monday night, I had addresses, phone numbers, and a very clear picture of what I was dealing with. Vincent Morales was a small-time loan shark working out of San Bernardino. Mid-50s, 3 priors, 1 conviction for aggravated assault. The Ukrainian was harder to pin down, street name probably, but the investigator assured me he was real and very much not someone you wanted to cross. I spent Tuesday morning doing something I'd never done before in my life. I called a criminal attorney, not to represent me, but to understand the landscape. His name was David Chen, and he'd helped a colleague of mine navigate some employment litigation. I told him I had a hypothetical question about debt collection. "How hypothetical?" he asked. "Very. Loan sharks don't use lawyers," he said flatly. "They use fear. Fear is cheaper and more effective. But fear requires witnesses, and witnesses require predictability. They need you to follow patterns so they know where to find you. That's their leverage." I understood what he was telling me. I needed to be unpredictable. I needed to go to them, not the other way around. Wednesday morning, I called the number for Vincent Morales. A woman answered. I said I was calling about my mother's account. There was a pause, then she transferred me to Vincent. "Who is this?" His voice was rough, smoker's voice. "Michael Torres. My mother is Linda Torres. I'm calling to settle her account." Another pause, longer this time. "You know who you're talking to?" "I have a general idea," I said. "I have $53,000. I want to bring it to you today, in cash. And I want you to destroy whatever paperwork you have on Linda Torres and never contact her again." "That's not how this works, buddy." "I know how it works," I said. "I also know you're not going to turn down $53,000 in cash from someone who's not playing games. I'll be at the address in San Bernardino at 3 p.m. today. Bring whoever you need to bring. I'll bring the money." I hung up before he could respond. What I did next was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. I called Detective Sarah Alvarez, a friend of my father's who'd gone into law enforcement. I told her I needed her help, but I needed to explain it in person, and I needed her to listen before she told me I was insane. We met at a coffee shop in Riverside at noon. I brought the duffel bag. I showed her the notebook. I told her everything. Sarah's face went through about 7 different expressions before she settled on angry. "You're going to go meet with a loan shark," she said flatly. "Alone, with $50,000 in cash, and you didn't think to call the police first?" "Because then my mother gets arrested for fraud or something," I said. "Or worse, these guys think she's a snitch and something happens to her. I need them to believe this is just a son paying his mother's debts and then walking away. That's all." "That's not all," Sarah said. "That's incredibly stupid." "I know." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. "I'm going to have 2 officers staged nearby," she said. "Not visible, not close enough to spook anyone. But if this goes sideways, we're 2 minutes away, and you're going to take this." She slid a small recording device across the table. "Clip to your collar, under your shirt. Everything they say is documented." "Why would you help me?" "Because I knew your father," she said, "and because what these people are doing is extortion, and if I can build a case, I will. But Michael, you listen to me very carefully. If anything goes wrong, if anyone pulls a weapon, if you feel even slightly unsafe, you run. You hear me? You don't try to be a hero. You run." I nodded. At 2:45 p.m., I pulled into the parking lot of a warehouse in San Bernardino. The address Vincent had given me when I called back to confirm. My hands were steady now. Everything was quiet in my head. I'd moved past fear into something else. A kind of clarity that comes when you've already accepted the worst possible outcome. Vincent was waiting outside with 2 other guys. One was massive, late 30s, with a neck tattoo. The other was older, maybe 60, with a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "You're the son," Vincent said. "I'm the son. I have your money." I opened the duffel bag. 53,000 in hundreds, bundled neatly. Vincent looked at it like he was admiring a painting. "Your mother borrowed a lot of money," he said. "My mother made a mistake. I'm fixing it. And now you're done with her. You're done with my family. You understand?" Vincent smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You understand who you're talking to?" he asked. "I do, and I don't care. You can take this money, or you can spend the next 6 months dealing with my mother's debt while the LAPD builds a case against you for extortion. Your choice." It was a bluff, a complete bluff, but Vincent didn't know that. His hand moved toward his jacket, and I felt my whole body go cold. This was it. This was the moment where everything went wrong. But then, the scarred man touched his arm. He and Vincent had a conversation with their eyes. Then Vincent pulled his hand away. "You're lucky," Vincent said. "We were going to take your mother's house, but you're lucky." I held out the duffel bag. He took it. He didn't count it. He trusted his scale, or his instinct, or whatever it was that men like him trusted. He nodded to one of his guys, who went inside the warehouse. 5 minutes later, he came back out with a manila folder. Documents, photographs, proof. "It's done," Vincent said. "Your mother's clean, and if she ever tries to borrow money again, tell her to stay away from us." I took the folder and the recordings and my dignity, and I walked back to my truck without looking back. 2 blocks away, I pulled over and called Sarah. "It's done. I have everything." "Are you hurt?" "No." "Thank God. Stay where you are. I'm coming to you." Sarah met me 15 minutes later. She reviewed everything, the recordings, the documents, the photographs. She listened to me explain what happened, with a look on her face like she was watching someone walk back from the edge of a cliff. "I'm going to prosecute," she said. "This is enough. Between the recordings and your mother's testimony, we can make a case." "What happens to Vincent?" "Prison, probably, or at least a significant sentence. What happens to your mother?" "I hadn't thought about that part." "She doesn't need anything to happen to her," I said. "She's suffered enough." Sarah nodded like she understood what I was really saying. "I'll talk to the DA," she said. "But Michael, you need to know something. This was incredibly reckless. You could have been hurt. You could have made things worse. You could have—" "I know," I said, "but it's done." What I didn't tell her was that when I got home that night and found Jennifer waiting for me in the kitchen with her arms crossed, looking at me like she was trying to see through my skin, I realized that the hard part wasn't over. "Brandon told me something today," she said quietly. "He said he found something at your mother's house, something he showed you, something you've been hiding from me for 4 days." I stood in the doorway and looked at my wife of 23 years, and I understood that I'd made a fundamental mistake. I'd tried to protect everyone by lying to all of them, but you can't protect people from the truth. You can only postpone their finding out and make them angrier when they do. "I need you to sit down," I said, and I told her everything. By Thursday, my mother knew. By Friday, Carmen knew. By Saturday, everyone knew, and everything was different. My mother cried when I told her I'd paid the debt. She cried harder when I told her I'd gone to the police. She tried to give me money back, money she didn't have, until I made her understand that the debt was gone, that Vincent Morales was going to prison, that she could sleep at night without wondering when men with scars would come to her door. Jennifer didn't speak to me for 2 days. On the 3rd day, she spoke to me, and what she said was worse than silence. "You didn't trust me," she said. "You didn't trust me to help you. You didn't trust me to handle the truth. After 23 years, you looked at me and decided I couldn't handle my own life. That's exactly what you did. You made a decision about what I could and couldn't know. You made a decision about what I could and couldn't handle. You lied to my face at your own birthday party while your mother was being threatened and your son was carrying that secret alone. You lied." She was right. She was completely right. The trial took 8 months. Vincent Morales got 3 years. The Ukrainian was never charged. He was too careful, too far removed. But Vincent took a plea deal that included testimony about his larger operation, and that was enough. My mother got a victim advocate and a therapist, and slowly, over time, stopped jumping at shadows. She never went back to the casino. She sold the house in Riverside and moved into a small condo in Irvine, closer to us, and she started volunteering at a community center teaching English to recent immigrants. Brandon never spoke about the notebook again, but I noticed he started asking more questions about money, about debt, about how the world worked. He was 11 years old, and he'd learned that adults could be broken, that families could hide terrible things, that sometimes you had to carry someone else's burden before you were ready. Jennifer and I went to couples therapy. We worked through the trust issue. We got better, but something shifted that October weekend. The easy certainty of our marriage became something more complicated, more real maybe, but also more fragile. I paid back everything I'd borrowed from my 401k, plus penalties. I paid back Marcus. I spent the next 2 years repairing the financial damage I'd done in 72 hours. But here's what I learned. You can't protect the people you love by lying to them. You can only protect yourself from having to see their fear. And eventually they find out, and then they have to carry both the original burden and the betrayal of knowing you didn't trust them with it. Brandon is 23 now. He's in college studying criminal justice. Jennifer is sitting next to me right now, reading over my shoulder as I write this. My mother calls every Sunday, and sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment in Vincent Morales' parking lot when his hand moved toward his jacket. I think about how close I came to not coming home, how close I came to making my family's worst nightmare real while trying to prevent it. My father used to say that being a man meant knowing when to stand and when to run. I still don't know if I made the right choice that day, but I know I couldn't have lived with myself if I hadn't tried.